There exists a story that the church would never allow you to see, but the story escaped through the mouths of the people, and the taste was of blood. In 1893, in New Orleans, two brothers conducted secret rituals within the very parish itself. Devotees were chosen, fattened like living offerings, and then they vanished. Their bodies, never buried, their flesh prepared and served secretly at the altar as part of a cannibal cult disguised as faith. For years, no one suspected, until one mistake revealed the horror that had been swallowed between prayers and hymns. And the silence of the church was never so deafening. What could drive two men of God to transform the most sacred sacrament into the most profane act in American Catholic history? The twin brothers Aurelius and Macedon Beaulieu arrived at the parish of St. Christopher in the French Quarter of New Orleans during March 1893. They were exactly 25 years old. Aurelius had been born merely 17 minutes before his twin brother. Church authorities sent them from the seminary in Baton Rouge with impeccable references and extraordinary recommendations. Both spoke Latin with perfect fluency and memorized apocryphal texts that other priests had never studied. Macedon possessed a celestial voice that made the faithful weep during the most complex Gregorian chants. His brother Aurelius mastered moral theology with precision that impressed even the most veteran seminary professors. St. Christopher's Church desperately needed new priests after a series of mysterious incidents. The previous pastor had passed away under inexplicable circumstances during the winter of 1892. He had spent his final weeks screaming unknown names during the early morning hours. Before him, two other priests had perished in less than 3 years. One had hanged himself in the sacristy without leaving an explanatory letter. The other was found in the Mississippi River with strange marks on his neck that were never properly investigated. The Beaulieu brothers seemed the divine answer to the desperate prayers of the New Orleans diocese. They arrived with renewed energy, progressive ideas about social ministry, and Eucharistic devotion that bordered on the supernatural. Aurelius was meticulous to the point of obsessive fanaticism and documented every aspect of parish life. He kept detailed records of every confession heard, every baptism celebrated, every funeral presided over with military precision. His handwriting was perfect and mathematically precise, inclined exactly 45 degrees to the right. He used ink manufactured personally, with ingredients purchased from specialized apothecaries in the French Quarter. Macedon complimented his twin brother with supernatural charisma that hypnotized the entire congregation from the first Sunday. His Sunday sermons attracted curious devotees from distant parishes like Algiers, Metairie, and Kenner. He spoke of divine love and redemptive sacrifice with emotional intensity that provoked mystical ecstasies among the most devout women. Some fainted during his most passionate homilies about Christ's passion. St. Christopher's Church stood imposingly on the strategic corner of Royal and Ursuline streets, in the heart of the historic French Quarter. Its colonial walls of cypress wood and brick were 3 feet thick to resist hurricanes. The construction dated from 1718 and had survived multiple natural catastrophes, political revolutions, and devastating epidemics. Beneath the main altar, the brothers discovered a complex network of secret tunnels connecting to other nearby churches. These underground passages had been used during the Civil War to hide Confederate sympathizers and valuable liturgical elements. The original plans had been lost for decades, making the labyrinth a secret known only by the new pastors. During their first pastoral months, the twins modified these underground spaces with extraordinary architectural care. They installed sophisticated ventilation systems between the original cypress beams to prevent the accumulation of toxic gases. They constructed massive black granite tables extracted from quarries near New Orleans that they justified as specialized altars for private meditations and deep contemplative prayers. They also installed drainage systems connected to the municipal sewers. The design included chambers specialized for different ritual purposes. One functioned as a private oratory decorated with golden crucifixes and religious prints imported from Rome. Another served as a theological library where they kept texts prohibited by the Index Librorum Prohibitorum. The third chamber, the largest and best ventilated, was adapted as a sacramental preparation room where they supposedly consecrated special hosts for extraordinary ceremonies and blessed holy oils for urgent cases of extreme unction. Their first chosen victim was Crescentius Thibodeau, a prosperous widower of 60 who had lost his wife Marie Claire to galloping tuberculosis. He came to the church seeking spiritual comfort after 6 months of deep mourning and severe depression. Crescentius weighed barely 52 kilograms when he personally met the Bolio brothers during a special mass for the dead. He was thin as an abandoned scarecrow, with sunken eyes that reflected infinite sadness. The twins immediately recognized in him the ideal characteristics for their secret purpose. Older man, recent widower, no children who could ask uncomfortable questions, with valuable properties that could be inherited by the church through testamentary donations. They promised him that divine grace would transform him physically and spiritually if he surrendered completely to an intensive program of contemplative prayer and controlled alimentary penance. They explained that he had been specially chosen by Providence. They offered him permanent refuge in the rooms annexed to the main temple, spaces traditionally reserved for illustrious guests or visiting priests from other dioceses. For 4 complete months, they fed Crescentius with abundant homemade food prepared personally. The menu included fresh bread made with select wheat, beans fried with lard, first-quality beef, artisanal goat cheese, gumbo prepared according to traditional convent recipes, and regional sweets like pralines and beignets. Macedon justified this abundant feeding by explaining that the body must be strengthened to resist the intense prayer and fasting sessions that would come later. He quoted biblical texts about the importance of preparing the bodily temple to receive the Holy Spirit. The widower gained weight, notably and acceleratedly during those months of special treatment. His cheeks, hollowed by pain, filled completely. His skeletal belly gradually rounded under the white tunic that the brothers had ceremoniously gifted him. Crescentius gained more than 26 kilograms in 4 months, a physical transformation that amazed all the parishioners who had known him from before. His cadaverous appearance disappeared completely, replaced by a healthy and prosperous appearance. A strange lethargy took hold of the widower during his final weeks of treatment. He spoke with increasing difficulty, as if permanently sedated with some unknown medication. His movements became slow and clumsy. Macedon explained to worried visitors that this somnolence was mystical ecstasy manifesting physically in his body, purified by intense prayer. He cited similar cases of contemplative saints who had experienced altered states of consciousness. On Sundays, Crescentius appeared punctually in the front row during all solemn masses celebrated by the twins. Parishioners commented on his physical transformation with genuine admiration, and some requested similar treatments for their sick family members. He seemed a completely different man from the one who had arrived months earlier, consumed by pain. Many considered him a living miracle, tangible proof of the healing power of the new pastors sent by divine providence. In July 1893, during a particularly hot night of the New Orleans summer, Crescentius disappeared without leaving any trace of his whereabouts. His room was found perfectly ordered, with all his belongings in their usual place. Aurelius solemnly announced from the pulpit during Sunday Mass that the widower had been called directly by God for a secret evangelizing mission in the dangerous mountains of Arkansas, where groups of bandits constantly attacked missionaries. The congregation applauded emotionally for the glorious destiny of their brother in Christ, who had passed from deepest mourning to missionary sainthood in barely 4 months. No one questioned the sudden absence or asked to know details about the supposed mission. The priest's word was absolute and unquestionable law in those conservative times, when ecclesiastical authority had more power than civil institutions themselves. The faithful considered any doubt as grave sin against due obedience. 2 weeks after the announcement about Crescentius, arrived Remedia Boudreau, a 38-year-old widow with 6 small children to raise completely alone. She had lost her husband in a work accident at the sugar plantations near New Orleans. The twins offered her exactly the same program of intensive feeding and deep contemplative prayer that had miraculously transformed Crescentius. They promised that her children would receive free education in parochial schools during her spiritual retreat. Remedia followed exactly the same pattern that Crescentius had followed during the previous months. She gained weight rapidly during the scorching summer of 1893, going from 45 kilograms to 72 in barely 3 months of intensive treatment. She developed that glassy and distant look that the brothers interpreted as an unmistakable sign of supernatural grace operating in her purified soul. Her movements became slow and ceremonial, as if in permanent trance. Her children noticed worrying changes in their mother's behavior and personality during the permitted Sunday visits. Remedia spoke constantly of extraordinary celestial visions and Marian apparitions that only she could contemplate. Macedon patiently calmed the worried children with artisanal sweets made in the convent kitchens and toys, carved in wood by indigenous artisans from nearby bayous. He explained to them that their mother was being prepared for a special divine mission. During the autumn of 1893, 8 more people received the special treatment from the Bolio brothers in the secret church facilities. All shared similar vulnerable characteristics: social isolation, desperate economic need, absence of influential relatives. The list included Florencio Broussard, silk merchant from Shreveport; Soledad Trem, seamstress orphan of 23; Barthélemy Boudouin, shoemaker widower with serious debts; and Conception Guidry, servant dismissed without work references. The twins had perfected a convincing and varied explanation for each mysterious disappearance that calmed the congregation. Some chosen ones had been sent to secret evangelizing missions in dangerous territories controlled by anti-Catholic bandits. Others had voluntarily decided to retire to contemplative monasteries located in remote mountainous regions where they would practice extreme penances and perpetual prayer. Some supposedly had emigrated to California, following specific vocational callings. The congregation grew exponentially during this bloody period, attracting faithful from increasingly greater distances. Entire families organized pilgrimages from distant parishes to hear Macedon's extraordinarily inspiring sermons during special festivities. They brought their terminally ill seeking the transforming grace that had visibly blessed the disappeared. Many offered generous donations, hoping their relatives would be selected to receive the spiritual treatment that produced evident physical miracles. The brothers selected their victims following very specific and calculated psychological and social criteria. They automatically rejected people with influential relatives, dangerous political connections, curious family members, or friends who could ask uncomfortable questions about their final whereabouts. They preferred recent widowers consumed by pain, orphans without family protection, foreign merchants without local connections, and dismissed servants who needed urgent refuge. Always individuals whose absence would not generate immediate official investigations. Remedia disappeared during a cold October dawn, following exactly the same pattern that Crescentius had followed months before. Her children were informed that she had departed to a cloistered convent in Arkansas to fulfill a sacred promise. Doña Refugia Bienville was 73 years old and had religiously cleaned St. Christopher's Church for more than 2 complete decades of devout service. Her husband had died in the Civil War defending the rights of the Catholic Church. She arrived punctually every dawn at 5 o'clock sharp to meticulously prepare the temple before the first daily Mass. She knew every corner of the colonial building, every sacred image, every nook where dust accumulated during the night. One particularly frigid November morning, Refugia noticed a penetrating and strange odor emanating directly from the most sacred area of the main altar. It wasn't blessed incense or melted candle wax, familiar aromas after decades of cleaning. It was something organic, putrefied, that vividly reminded her of the municipal slaughterhouse where her brother had worked for years before dying in a cholera epidemic. The smell seemed to surge from the very depths of the consecrated earth. The elderly woman followed the nauseating trail of the odor to a slightly displaced black volcanic stone slab behind the Golden Tabernacle, imported from Spain. Moving it with extreme difficulty, she discovered an adobe staircase descending into absolute darkness. The stench intensified brutally to the point of provoking violent retching that forced her to cover her nose and mouth with her wool shawl. Refugia descended the first slippery steps, with a candle trembling uncontrollably in her hand, wrinkled by arthritis. The underground walls were covered with greenish phosphorescent mold that glowed weakly in the humid darkness. The air was thick and difficult to breathe, charged with toxic gases that had accumulated for months in the closed spaces. On the first underground level, she found 3 main chambers connected by colonial semicircular arches, decorated with religious carvings that contrasted grotesquely with the real purpose of the spaces. The first chamber contained industrial butcher hooks hanging from the vaulted ceiling. The second showed massive black granite tables permanently stained with brown residues that clearly had not been properly cleaned. The surfaces conserved traces of activities that Refugia preferred not to imagine in detail. The third chamber, the largest and best ventilated, housed large clay pots filled to the brim with thick liquids of intense reddish color that emitted nauseating vapors. On an improvised table, Refugia immediately recognized familiar tools: specialized knives for skinning with wooden handles worn by frequent use, small but sharp axes for disarticulating joints, serrated saws specially designed for cutting human bones with precision, and metallic containers for collecting blood. In a particularly dark corner, partially hidden under rags soaked in dried blood and other bodily fluids, lay unmistakable fragments of human skeletons in different states of decomposition. Ribs, femurs, partial skulls with perfectly circular holes. Some long bones conserved putrefied flesh remains firmly adhered, suggesting that processing had been recent. Others showed saw marks, indicating systematic separation of extremities following professional butchery techniques. Refugia climbed the stairs in a state of deep and paralyzing shock, carefully replaced the stone slab, trying not to make noise, and finished her morning cleaning in sepulchral silence. Her Catholic mind refused categorically to process the evident reality. During the following tense and anguishing weeks, the elderly woman observed the Bolia brothers with completely new and suspicious eyes. She noticed how Aurelius systematically disappeared every night after the final rosary, heading toward the restricted areas of the temple. How Macedon bought suspiciously large quantities of refined sea salt and exotic imported spices in the specialized markets of the French Quarter. How both had developed a voracious appetite for red meats prepared in particular ways. Macedon's sermons had acquired a more intense and obsessive tone when he spoke about the sacrament of communion. He repeatedly insisted on the importance of Eucharistic realism, explaining that consecrated bread literally transformed into Christ's living flesh. He described the transubstantiation process with anatomical details that made some faithful uncomfortable but hypnotized the majority. He spoke of the taste of divinity, of the texture of redemptive love, of the need to chew slowly to completely absorb grace. One frozen December dawn, Refugia made the bravest decision of her life. She hid strategically in the confessional after the last night mass, patiently waiting until the twins believed they were completely alone in the sacred temple. What she witnessed during those cursed hours would pursue her implacably until the last day of her earthly existence, engraving itself in her memory with clarity that no time could ever erase. Aurelius and Macedon descended together to the secret basements, carrying a completely unconscious human body wrapped in liturgical blankets. It was Barthélemy Baudouin, the indebted shoemaker, who had arrived seeking spiritual and economic refuge. The brothers worked in absolute silence, with the technical efficiency of experienced professional butchers who had perfected their technique during months of constant practice. Every movement was precise, calculated, almost ceremonial in its ritualized execution. They divided the macabre task according to their complementary abilities developed throughout their criminal partnership. Aurelius meticulously handled the technical dismemberment process, while Macedon pronounced continuous prayers in classical Latin. Both wore thick leather aprons permanently dyed with dark stains that no washing could ever eliminate. Their movements revealed months of experience in processing human bodies for specific culinary purposes. Refugia observed, horrified from her hiding place, how they converted Barthélemy's body into perfectly symmetrical portions following precise anatomical patterns. They separated flesh from bones with almost surgical precision, classifying each part according to criteria that only they understood. The process included conservation techniques they had learned, studying medical anatomy texts, and industrial butchery manuals. They used sea salt to preserve some portions, while others they processed immediately for proximate consumption. Macedon blessed each cut with specific prayers, adapted from Eucharistic consecration rituals. In his distorted mind, they were transforming profane human flesh into sacred substance, suitable for sacramental consumption by devout faithful. The following Sunday, the twins organized an extraordinary special communion to celebrate the Feast of the Immaculate Conception with unusual pomp. The entire congregation participated with exceptional religious fervor, including families who had traveled from distant parishes. The consecrated bread had a particularly substantial and different taste that many attributed to a special recipe brought from Rome by the new pastors. Its texture was denser and juicier than the traditional bread used in previous communions. Refugia managed to avoid communion by claiming severe digestive problems, requiring medicinal fasting prescribed by the local doctor. From her strategic pew in the last row, she observed how more than 300 faithful devoutly consumed what she knew was processed flesh. The twins personally distributed communion with special solemnity, carefully observing each communicant's reactions. Some commented on the extraordinary taste. Others mentioned an unusual sensation of spiritual fullness after receiving the sacrament. Aurelius's secret diaries, discovered subsequently behind the main Baroque altarpiece during the official investigation, revealed the complete and terrifying dimension of the systematized horror that had operated for almost an entire year. Each entry was dated with obsessive military precision and documented with perfect handwriting that showed not the slightest sign of remorse or moral doubt. The older brother had registered every technical detail with scientific coldness that chilled the blood. The 18th of June, 1893, Crescentius T. finally reached optimal weight required according to our calculations. 78 kilograms exact, representing net gain of 26 kilograms since March. Procedure executed without technical complications at 3:47 inches the morning. Macedon appropriately directed consecration prayers. The 25th of August, 1893, Remedia B. showed unexpected initial physical resistance during preparatory phases. It was necessary to administer concentrated doses of poppy tonic for 3 consecutive days to ensure complete cooperation. Final result completely satisfactory from technical and gastronomic perspectives. Exceptionally tender and tasty flesh, ideal for special Sunday communions. The diaries meticulously documented 17 victims processed between March 1893 and January 1894, each identified by initials and exact processing dates. The brothers had developed a complete industrial system covering the entire process from selection to distribution. The system included psychological selection of vulnerable victims, controlled fattening through specialized feeding, silent elimination using natural sedatives, culinary processing following professional butchery techniques, and massive ritual distribution during special Eucharistic ceremonies. Aurelius recorded every technical detail with absolute scientific coldness that revealed a mind completely disconnected from moral reality. He documented body weights before and after nutritional treatment, specific gastronomic preparation methods, observed reactions of communicants. He also included technical innovations developed throughout the months to improve process efficiency, new sedation methods, perfected conservation techniques, special recipes to disguise suspicious flavors, improved ventilation systems to eliminate odors. Macedon contributed elaborate theological reflections that morally and spiritually justified their cannibal acts through distorted interpretations of biblical texts and patristic documents. In his heretical interpretation, they were literally performing Christ's redemptive work. The twins genuinely believed they elevated their sacrificed victims to a superior state of celestial grace through transformation into Eucharistic substance. Simultaneously, they provided the ignorant congregation with an authentically literal communion with the Savior's mystical body. The official ecclesiastical investigation began when the auxiliary bishop of New Orleans, Monsignor Ignatius Boudreau Ouitrem, received an anonymous letter written with trembling handwriting denouncing heretical and criminal activities suspected in St. Christopher's parish. The missive, probably sent by Refugia Bienville after weeks of moral agony, described suspicious odors, inexplicable disappearances, and worrying changes in the new pastor's behavior that suggested grave criminal activities. On the 14th of February 1894, a special investigative commission arrived without prior notice at the cursed parish during the early morning hours. They found the Beaulieu brothers meticulously preparing a special ceremony to commemorate the approaching Ash Wednesday. In the secret basements, they discovered physical evidence that far exceeded their worst institutional fears and confirmed the most terrible suspicions expressed in the anonymous denunciation. The processing system included completely functional facilities for industrial processing of human bodies. The investigators carefully cataloged bone remains of 17 distinct people identifiable through primitive forensic techniques available at the time. The entire system functioned with industrial efficiency that revealed months of careful planning and systematic execution. The facilities included improvised adobe ovens for controlled cooking, specialized brine tanks for conservation, wooden shelves for meat drying, specialized dismemberment tools, and ventilation systems for odor control. The twins were arrested without offering any physical resistance, behaving as if they had been awaiting this moment for months. Aurelius voluntarily surrendered all his detailed diaries, as if feeling genuine pride for the technical precision of his documentation. Macedon requested special permission to direct one last prayer for his victims' souls. also requesting that a special requiem mass be celebrated for their eternal rest. His behavior suggested complete disconnection from the reality of his crimes. The trial was never public for institutional security reasons, and to avoid scandals that could irreparably damage the Catholic Church's reputation in an era of grave political tensions with the federal government. Diocesan archives suggest the brothers were discreetly transferred to a secret penitential monastery located in the remote mountains of Colorado, where they supposedly would spend the rest of their lives in reclusion and perpetual penance. Other contradictory and fragmentary records indicate that both perished during transport from officially unspecified causes, possibly executed extraofficially by ecclesiastical authorities who considered their crimes unforgivable and incompatible with divine mercy. Their bodies were never delivered to relatives for traditional Christian burial, breaking centuries of Catholic tradition. Some rumors suggested they had been secretly cremated, a practice prohibited by official doctrine but considered necessary for exceptional cases. The last physical evidence disappeared completely in February 1894, when authorities ceremonially burned all materials confiscated in St. Christopher's cursed basements. Ashes carried by winds toward the silent bayous of Louisiana, where the darkest secrets of American ecclesiastical history rest eternally. Did the cannibal twins who transformed communion into human flesh banquet really exist? Or is this entire story a product of Catholic American folklore, designed to warn about the dangers of blindly trusting religious authority? Until today, no one knows if the story of the Beaulieu family really happened, or if it's nothing more than a rural legend passed from generation to generation.